welcome back. We're glad that you're here today. If you're visiting with us at Chaparral, we offer you a special welcome today. We're glad you're here. We're in the very beginning of this new series called Famous Last Words. And we've been looking at the sayings that Jesus has from the cross. And at the same time, we talk about how important last words are and how important they are when we hear them. In fact, last week we started off by talking about those times when maybe we hear someone say something and we know because what they said, what they're about to do might be their last words, right? Like this guy right here who's trying to feed an alligator and it says, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty." Probably his last words, maybe. Anybody here have a friend or wife or husband that is not the best driver in the world? Don't raise your hand. Nice job, Debbie. Yeah, we have that, right? I mean, we have those people. But we know if we say something to them that they're not a good driver, what happens? It could be our last words, right? So I've got a solution for you, a biblical solution. You get a bumper sticker and you put on there 2 Kings 9:20. And you kind of hope they don't look it up because it's like a warning to other drivers. It's like this, it's like a biblical, just a verse in the Bible. Here's what it says, though. It says, this is in 2 Kings 9:20. It looks like the driving of Jehu, son of Nimshi, for he drives like a maniac. So it kind of, warns other drivers. You don't have to say anything necessarily. Remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right, where God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and he tells Lot and his wife to leave town, and he says what? Don't look back, or you'll be turned into a pillar of salt. So don't do that, right? What do you think Noah's last word, or not Noah, but Lot's last words to his wife were? Is something following us? Yeah, I think it was. That was pretty funny, I thought. Someone's following us, she looks back. Okay, whatever. All right, so here we are, though. We're talking about last words, and we're getting kind of serious now about what Jesus says. And one thing about his last words from the cross is they are serious. And he's in this moment of suffering and agony, and he doesn't leave his words to chance. He's deliberate and purposeful about what he says. And they're purposeful not just for the people in the first century, in his day, but they're purposeful and they're meaningful to us today, right here and right now. Now, last week we took a look at the first words from the cross, and that was, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." These words of grace and forgiveness. And we said at the cross, God's richest grace meets our deepest needs, right? God's richest grace meets our deepest need to be forgiven and accepted. And that's where it begins. Well, this week we're going to start with the second word from the cross. Now, Jesus was crucified on a hill called Golgotha, which we believe in the first century was just outside the city of gates of Jerusalem. And this skull, this hill called Golgotha, is also called the place of the skull. We don't know if that's because it was shaped like a skull or because there was a lot of skulls on it, because it was this place of execution. But he was there, and he was crucified between, it says, two thieves, two criminals, one on his left and one on his right. And we don't know who these guys were. We don't know what they did. We don't know if they stole something or what they stole or who they stole it from, or if they killed somebody or killed a Roman soldier. We don't know what they did, but what we do know is that what they did got them the death penalty. They were condemned to die for whatever they did. And something else, they admit that they did it. They admit that they're guilty of whatever crime they committed. And so now they are broken, humiliated, exposed to the world, left to die. They can't move their hands. They can't move their feet. They got to pull against these nails just to breathe. And they're pinned there on these crosses. But the attention of that moment is not necessarily on them, it's on Jesus. Because it seems like at this moment it's turned into pile on Jesus day. Ridicule Jesus. I mean, it's not enough that he had this mock fake trial. It's not enough that they put a crown of thorns on him, make fun of him as a king. It's not enough that they beat him. They made him walk through the streets with this beam on his back, pushing him and shoving him, knocking him over. It's not enough that he's crucified and dying. They're still making fun of him, even while he dies on the cross. And you'd think like the religious leaders of their day would be like, no, just let him die. But they don't. They join right in everybody else. They say stuff like, he saved others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah. The soldiers who are there, they join in making fun of Jesus. They say stuff like, if he's the king of the Jews, let him save himself. Show us, prove it to us. They mock him, and they scorn him, and they tease. In fact, it says in the Bible that they put a sign over his head that said, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. You might remember, or you may have seen it like this on a statue or maybe a painting. And these are just the, like an acronym, the first letters of those words in Latin. Jesus of Nazareth, King, in Latin, Rex, of the Jews. And Pilate had this put in 3 languages over his head: Latin, Greek, and in Hebrew, so that everyone got in on the joke. So everyone could make fun of him that this guy called himself the King of the Jews. I read a book, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was a book written by a Jewish rabbi. And he talks about this moment and this sign. And what he said was that in Hebrew, it would look like this up here on the screen. That the words, Jesus the Nazarene and King of the Jews, if you do the acronym with those letters, the first letter of those 4 Hebrew words, you get the name Yahweh, God's holy name. Almost ironically, that's who he is. He's God, and he's there dying. People are making fun of him. That's maybe why the Jewish leaders were so upset that this sign was there, because God's name was on it, and it was true. Making fun of him. And even the guys next to him begin to make fun. In Luke 23, we get the story where one of the criminals, it says, who was hanged there, kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." Aren't you the guy supposed to save everybody? Aren't you the miracle worker? Funny way of showing it, Messiah. Why don't you do something? Why don't you do something now? It'd be a good time to do it right now. Why don't you help me now? Ever prayed like that to God? If you're God, why don't you help me now? Hey God, do the right thing in the right way, the way I want to do it now. Ever done that? Prayed that prayer to God? Do it my way? Even when we know that we got ourselves in the situation, but we know how we got there, we know the problem, we want God to come fix it right now on our terms. We've all kind of done that. That's what this guy is doing. He's displacing his anger onto Jesus. We do that too. You get mad and you lash out at someone around you. I did that once, just one time, back like 95 or something. Well, this is true. So we were at home, and I went in the pantry to get something. Jacob was real little back then, and I went to go get something, and I knocked a bottle off the shelf in the pantry, and it just shattered the glass and some sticky something all over the place. And I go, "Stacy Renee," that's Stacy's middle name, by the way. "Stacy Renee," and Jacob goes, "Dad, she's not here right now." I'm like, "I know." "Well, then why are you blaming her?" "Well, what am I going to say now? Well, she put the bottle in there." "Dad, you knocked it over." This is not helpful, Jacob, but he's right? I was displacing it on Stacy. It wasn't even there. Ever done that before? More than once? Well, this guy does that, right? He gets angry and displaces his anger on Jesus. He knew what he'd done, yet he is arrogant and angry and bitter, and he won't ask for help. He's going to blame somebody else. He won't acknowledge his own stuff, his own junk in his life. He instead is going to mock Jesus to the very end. Displace his anger on someone else. The second guy, on the other side of Jesus, reaches out. In a desperate plea to Jesus, he reaches out to the Son of God. He is pinned in place, nailed to a cross, and yet he's going to pin his hopes on this one who is dying next to him. Verse 40, but this other prisoner, rebuked him, saying, do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. He admits it. Look, I deserve this. You deserve this. Don't know what happened, but whatever it was, he deserved what he's getting. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't blame somebody else for a situation. He knows he's a criminal and a sinner, and he's messed up his life, and this is where he ended up. But instead of displacing that anger and blaming someone else, he turns to Jesus. Verse 42, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Why did he say that? Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Maybe he saw that Jesus didn't retaliate when they nailed him to the cross, or when they made fun of him and mocked him. Maybe he heard Jesus say, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Maybe he noticed that he didn't blast his enemies, blame somebody else. Maybe he knew him as the miracle worker, the prophet from Galilee. Maybe he even met him. Whatever the reason, he turns to Jesus. And instead of cursing God, being full of pride and anger, he humbles himself. And he turns to this dying man next to him and says, remember me when you're named king. What an act of faith, right? And he's right there in the same situation. And he sees something in Jesus that says, you're someone special. You can help me. So remember me. And those are two words I think that we all want to say to God at some point. It's deep within us that God remembers you and me. It's like our deepest prayer. But what is it that we want God to remember? What does he want God to remember? I mean, does God know everything, remember everything about us? Like God has us on videotape that he can pull up any moment of our lives and say, yep, see that right there when you were in high school, see that moment, or when you were in college, or yesterday, you see that? I remember that. Is that what this guy wants God to remember? Hey, Jesus, when you get to heaven, your kingdom, bring my file. Remember me. I don't think so. Because this guy did something wrong. Something he's condemned for. I don't think he wants God to remember that. Maybe he's thinking something like what Psalm 25 verse 7 said. In Psalm 25 verse 7 it says, remember not the sins of my youth. It's a prayer. God, don't remember that stuff I did back then. Don't remember that. Just kind of forget that stuff. Can we hope for that? Is that a legitimate prayer? Can we hope that God can forget some things about us? God, I really hope you don't remember what I did in high school. I really hope you don't remember what I did when I first got that first job and I cheated people. God, don't remember what I did last week when I got angry and lashed out. There's things, God, I don't want you to remember. Is that possible? I I think this thief hopes that God remembers us like a good friend or a loving parent remembers us. A friend who forgets what you've done in order to never forget who you are. Right? Who is out of love and compassion forgets things about us. Who forgets what you've done in order to never forget who you are. That's what God wants from us. That God will love us enough to forget some things, but never forget us. Remember me, oh God. That's what his prayer is. And then Jesus is going to answer. Jesus doesn't answer the first guy. He answers the second the one who reaches out and says, remember me. He says, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Today. So there you have it. The first guy who makes it home is a thief. Right? The first guy who makes it into heaven is dying a condemned man. Today, you'll be with me. That's what Jesus was. I think that's what drove the religious leaders of the day nuts about Jesus. Because here's this guy who said, he was proclaiming God's kingdom, who was a teacher, a rabbi, a miracle worker, a prophet, talking about God all the time, exemplifying God's life, speaking for and about God, and yet here he is hanging out with the riffraff and the troublemakers and the thieves and the prostitutes, the tax collectors. With those folks, he's hanging out. And now that he's dying on a cross, he's still doing it. And no longer can he hold a child because his hands are nailed in place. He can't reach out and cure a leper. He can't reach out and comfort the prostitute or the blind to give sight. He can't do those things, but he can still reach out and show grace to this criminal who is dying next to him. And so he says, today you'll be with me in paradise. He didn't ask him to make amends. He didn't say, okay, look, since you're a criminal, we're going to take you to heaven, but before you get in, you got to peel some potatoes. Right? Or before you get in, you got to write 1,000,000 times on our big chalkboard, I'm a sinner. He doesn't say anything like that. Instead, he simply says, today you'll be with me in paradise. Because this criminal said, remember me. Just remember me. I wonder, as I read this text today, is the last part necessary? Truly I tell you, today you'll be with me. Is in paradise necessary? Is it enough just to say, you'll be with me? Because when I think of being with Jesus, I don't think of being on puffy clouds and learning to play the harp. If you like the harp, that's okay, but that's not what I think of. I think being with Jesus is enough. And that happens, he says, today. In John 14, Jesus says, in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. That's heaven, right? That's paradise. And what is it about? Being with Jesus. Revelation 3:20. Listen, I'm standing at the door, knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to you and eat with you, and you with me. Matthew 18. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. And my favorite of these, at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the last words he's going to speak to his disciples before he leaves to go back to heaven, he says, remember, I am with you always to the very end of the age. That means that this with me part, today you'll be with me, is today. Not the future. We don't have to wait until we're on the last bit of our life. We're hanging on by a thread. We're on our own cross. We're about to die. We don't have to wait until that moment. This decision, this promise, these words of Jesus are meant for today. It starts now, and it forces us to make a decision today. And it's a really super simple decision in concept. And the decision is this: which thief are you? Which thief am I? So we sit here today, we ask ourselves, which thief are we? Are we the first one? Because here's, by the way, the thing is that we're all guilty, right? We all deserve to be condemned, all of us. The book of Romans says all are guilty, none are innocent, not even one. So we're all like those two thieves. The question is, which one are you most like? Like the one who's going to blame somebody else, to turn and get angry with God, reject God, and not ask for help? As a result of what happens at the cross with Jesus, I think this first thief is going to spend an eternity pretty distant from God. Not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. He didn't ask for help. He didn't turn to Jesus and humble himself. Book of James, chapter 4, it says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's the second guy. The one who wasn't defiant or angry, but desperate. Jesus, just remember me. Be with me today. Each one of us, you see, is like these two thieves. The beauty is you get to choose which one. You get to choose today which thief you're going to be like. And so do I. Are we going to be defiant against God or desperate for God? Are we going to cry out against God or be the desperate one who cries out to God for help? Because this criminal who is dying simply says, just remember me. I need your help. Jesus says, I'll be with you. That's more than enough. There's a true story told about a woman, a young lady actually named Christina, who grew up in Sao Paulo. But that's this little bitty kind of village off the way, tiny, little bitty house. They had a little wood-burning stove to keep it warm. She slept on a pallet, like a straw mattress at night. And just her and her mom was trying to raise her and work, and Christina got just tired of a life of poverty. She got tired of eating the same thing every day, tired of that mat, tired of getting wood for the stove, tired of her mom's Christian values, tired of her traditional life. And so she decided that she was going to leave home, and her mom, Maria, kind of was seeing her slip away from her family. Well, Christina did leave, and she went to Rio, the big town. And there she met a man who said he'd take care of her. He had a nice car, big house. He said as long as she did everything he told her to do, he'd take care of her. Well, the mom knew what was going on. She knew that her daughter was stubborn, and that even people who get in a desperate situation, who become hungry, will do the unthinkable to survive. She knew that about her daughter. So she knows that she has to go and find her daughter. So she collects all of the money she has, some clothes, puts it in a bag, and she goes down to the local drugstore, and she takes a bunch of pictures of herself, little bitty black and white photos, and packs them in her bag and heads off to Rio. And she spends the next few weeks going from place to place, places that she thought her daughter would have ended up. Places like hotels, bars, nightclubs, places that she was afraid her daughter would end up. And she would leave that photo stuck on maybe a mirror or a phone booth or at the front desk, somewhere where it was visible, but hoping that her daughter, Christina, would see that photo. And she'd written something on the back, like a little inscription on the back. Well, Rio's a huge town, and so after a few weeks, Maria ran out of money and had to go home, just heartbroken. She couldn't find her daughter. She goes back home and begins her life again. And back in Rio, one day, Christina's leaving a hotel. She's walking down the stairs, and kind of the smile that she had is gone. Her beautiful brown eyes are now kind of sunken in. She's heartbroken. Her dream has become a nightmare. She's heading down that hotel stairs. She sees what she thinks is a photo of her mom on the window. And she gets closer, and sure enough, she begins to weep because that's a picture of her mom. She takes off that photo, she turns it over, and she reads in her mom's handwriting what she wrote. Her mom said, "Whatever you have done, whatever you have become, It doesn't matter. Please come home. When you think about your life, think of all the places that Jesus has left that note for you. A picture of himself, crucified, arms spread wide, inviting you home. That despite our stupidity, despite our anger, despite our ignorance and our foolishness, Jesus decides to remember you, remember me. So he leaves his photo all around town with his arms open wide saying, whoever you are, whatever you've done, it doesn't matter. I remember you. Please come home. Let's pray together.